Welcome to the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Bell, and I interview business leaders who are committed to their own growth and the development of everyone on their team. If you enjoy my podcast, be sure to subscribe and rate it on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for joining me today. I'm your host, Meredith Bell, and I love bringing to you people who are committed to their own development and also really want to invest in the development of people who are in their world, whether it's on their team or in the entire organization. You're going to love my guest today because she does both of those just so beautifully. Her name is Tamera Maresh-Carver. Tamera, welcome to my show.
Meredith, thanks so much for having me. I wanted to say longtime listener, first-time caller.
Thank you. Well, I love that you've become a fan and I'm also thrilled to be able to highlight you with my guest today. So before we dive into the questions I have for you, let my audience know more about who you are so they'll appreciate our conversation even more. Tamera is the Managing Director of Employee Development, Innovation, and Organizational Strategy at FedEx Express. Her responsibilities include global leadership development, employee development, and organizational effectiveness, among others. She's been with the company since 1998 when she started as a courier and advanced into management in 2003. FedEx Express is the airline side of the FedEx family and employs 250,000 people in 221 countries around the globe. And I'm so excited to share with you that Tamera has won the most prestigious award that FedEx bestows 3 different times in her career. I think she's truly a superstar, as you're going to find out in our conversation today. So Tamera, let's jump in. There are so many wonderful things that FedEx is doing to create a positive work environment. First, I want to hear a little bit more and have my listeners hear more about your journey from courier to the head of U.S. Learning.
Thanks, Meredith. I feel so lucky that FedEx and I found each other. I took a part-time courier job because I needed to go back to school, and FedEx had tuition reimbursement that I could use to help me do it. And, you know, of all my siblings, I'm the only person that got out of college with no student debt, thanks to that tuition reimbursement. It was supposed to just be until I finished my education, but I stayed and I continued to move up, leading teams in the field. And like a lot of my generation, I had an aging family member that I had to kind of step back and take care of. My mother-in-law had dementia. And there were probably some leadership lessons there too. That's probably another conversation. But we got her through that with as much grace as you can with that disease. And when that happened, I took a step back from leadership into an individual contributor role at FedEx. And I moved to headquarters and I was running our quality science division. And I continued my growth from there through the learning and development division. And that's the kind of fun thing about FedEx, the thing that makes me so excited about it. It's one of those places where you could be a pilot or a lawyer. You could be a meteorologist or an engineer. So really sky's the limit here with what we do. And now I get to run organizational effectiveness, employee development, HR data, all of that fun stuff. I still pretty much pinch myself every morning when I get up.
Well, you know, that's something I've picked up in the conversations we've had is this enthusiasm you have for the work that you're doing and also for the company itself. So you are a wonderful champion for the company. And I just think there's such a wonderful story just there with your own experience. You know, one of the things that you and I had talked about before that really struck a chord with me is this idea of identifying what's wrong with the hustle culture, because that's happening in so many places. We need to move fast, get a lot of things done, but you're pursuing an alternative. Talk about why there's a problem with that whole hustle idea and what you're putting in place instead.
Well, yeah. And you know that the people who are the most passionate and engaged with work can be the people that burn out the fastest. So it's really important that we think about that. Do you remember a few years ago during the Olympics when Simone Biles just stepped completely out of the competition?
Oh, yes.
I mean, it was really controversial. It's the Olympics. That's when you're clutch. That's when you just show up. I mean, how many of us ever get the opportunity to compete at that level? But as that conversation started to unfold and I started to think more and more about it, I became increasingly convinced that what she was showing wasn't a lack of hustle or a lack of worthiness, which I think sometimes we see those things as the same thing, but it was courage. And since that moment, I started to really rethink and become a different leader because I thought about her health and I thought about decisions that I was making where a break might have set a better example for my team than continuing to hustle. You know, those weekend emails, that burning the midnight oil, and what example was that setting? And our hustle culture is kind of a little bit of that original Puritan work ethic. But what it can do is metastasize into almost a workaholism. And what we've seen in the past few years is people opting completely out of the workplace, people reshuffling and burning out. Our heroes, they teach us things like hard work pays off and consistency pays off. And I see coffee mugs that say things like, I've got dreams more important than my sleep, or nobody cares, work harder. And it's kind of this idea that if we roll up our sleeves, we can overtake the fastest and the smartest. And, you know, even those sometimes who get a pretty good head start on us. And that's kind of the idea of meritocracy. That by just demonstrating our abilities and our merit, that we could get ahead and we could reach the top. But that can kind of have a dark side too, if we let it go unchecked. Mm-hmm. And so I've really been evaluating, you know, what we tell people in leader development and how I'm setting a situation for my own team that kind of can romanticize that toxic productivity, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I'd love to have you share what are some things you've personally changed.
Yeah.
Since gaining that awareness?
I think it's about being more intentional in the way that we curate work and creating meaningful work for ourselves and our teams to do. See, it's not about achieving less or lowering our standards or our expectations. It really isn't. It's about working smarter, doing work that adds value, work that's not busy work. Let me ask you this. Is there anything worse than improving a process that we shouldn't be doing in the first place?
That's such a great question.
It's like digging a hole and throwing the dirt into the other hole you dug. And so we let our staffs and ourselves do a whole lot of that. And I think we've all experienced that day at work where things are so busy, like we're eating lunch in front of the email to try and catch up. And we get to the finish line and we look back at like the big rock objectives, the things we really needed to get done that day. And we realize we haven't even touched those. And yet we've never come up for air like the entire day. And I think that happens because we're spending so much time on things that are tactical and repeatable, like answering an email or answering a message, or this one's my personal nemesis. When I do way more with something than really needs to be done, I sometimes call it building a Ferrari when a skateboard would be fine.
Yes, I can relate to that one.
But we glamorize it. And like we feel good about ourselves when we're busy. And so we have a tendency to fill our days that keep us distracted and keep us at least looking busy. And that keeps us away from that critical thinking and really improving what we're working on. It keeps us tactical. Mm-hmm. And I think too that this has gotten worse since people started working from home. And let me tell you why I'm saying that. Sometimes when you're working from home, electronics are your only form of connection with other people. And I think if we're honest, there's also a worry about how people perceive us when we're working at home. Like, are we really working? Mm-hmm. And these drives can kind of combine to put us at the mercy of our inbox as our to-do list. And Meredith, our inbox is always someone else's to-do list, not ours. Mm-hmm. So if we're really intentional about work and what we allow ourselves to prioritize for our teams to work on, then we can be much more effective. And I think, you know, when we think about it, if we can remember that there are a finite amount of hours in every day, and we get a multiple choice test about how we spend them. So we have to choose really, really well.
Mm-hmm. You're bringing up such an important point around taking time to slow down and think. been caught in that same trap at times. And I guess I've had some of the same kind of ahas that you have. And I'm guessing when you became aware of this yourself and you changed your behavior, you also probably communicated to your team about expectations and desires around what you would want them to do differently also, right? It's not just you're changing your own behavior.
Well, you're right. And so much of that I get to drive even when I didn't realize I was driving it. So if I send my team an email at night, they feel as if they need to respond to it because it's me asking them, and they want to do the right thing. They work really hard. So if it can wait until the next day, or if it can wait until Monday, in fact, I let plenty of things sit in my draft folder so that I don't send them and ping somebody. But there are going to be those emergencies where we have to do those kind of things. Everyone has them. So, man, don't waste it on the things that aren't an emergency, and let people have that separation and refill their batteries.
I'm curious if you have asked your team to give you feedback about behaviors, because I know you're just so open with them. And I'm just guessing that that they feel safe being able to talk to you about a concern they might have in this whole area.
I mean, I really strive for that. I think all of us kind of get into this. I don't want anybody to think that I'm not dedicated and I'm not working hard. And do you remember that fairy tale, The Emperor's New Clothes?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So like this emperor is so vain, and he just loves, and these scam artists, they come to town and they tell him, hey, we make the very best clothes in the entire kingdom. And we have this elite thread that we use. And there's just one catch on that thread. You can't see it if you're a fool. And so, spoiler alert, okay, for everybody, is there is no thread at all. And so, of course, the emperor absolutely has to have their clothes. And then he makes believe, and everybody around him makes believe, that they can see these clothes and that they're so beautiful, because nobody wants to be thought foolish. Like, none of us want to be thought like we're not the hard worker in the group, right? And it takes this kid who finally yells out as the emperor's walking through town naked, hey, you're not wearing anything. And I think, when we talked about Simone Biles, right, that kid, he was the brave one because he was facing ridicule and looking really foolish, but he still spoke up.
Mm-hmm.
We did a book study, and I did this very intentionally with my immediate team, of Amy Edmondson's Fearless Organization book. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to read it.
I haven't read that one.
It's fantastic. She's a Harvard researcher. I really recommend it. But she talks about how that kind of fear of being uncomfortable can lead to really catastrophic mistakes. Eastman Kodak inventing digital photography and then burying it because they were afraid that they wouldn't have film to sell to people. She talks about how a nurse might not correct a doctor who's going to give a harmful dose because, they must know more than me and they don't want to speak up. And without saying anything, then that mistake is not corrected. And the emperor and the doctor and Eastman Kodak would have loved to have had the foresight to not make those mistakes in the first place. So we have to set a different tone. And that really comes from that psychological safety, reducing that discomfort. And if you can set that kind of environment, mm-hmm. you create an environment at work where people will pick up dropped balls and run with them, and where people will strive for continuous improvement. And in all of that, I mean, you can't just be mad at the emperor's staff for walking around and helping him with this thing, right? Because he's got a lot of skin in that game, literally. As a leader, we love to hear good news. We love when people say, this is working great, this is going fantastic. But the thing is, people are never going to tell you when they're doing busy work. They're going to burn out and leave. If they can't tell you that it's too much, they're not going to tell you what's innovative and their ideas that they can share with you. And they're not going to give you discretionary effort unless they feel safe enough to do it.
So what are you, not necessarily just you personally doing with your own team, but what are you doing to create this culture of psychological safety organization-wide? Yeah,
for sure. Not only are we sharing it, but remember that I came here in this role of doing the quality science thing. And we've been and I'm going to use this word with your listeners, but Kaizen, so very grassroots and organic about the way we think about quality and the way that we ask people to say, hey, if you see something, say something. Could we make that safer? Could we make that better? Is there something that completely annoys you that we do all of the time that we could make a better experience for you or our customer if we just changed it? And really encouraging and rewarding speaking up in those ways. We also run an employee survey every year where we hold ourselves in a 360-degree accountable to how we're leading our employees. My group administers that too. And we really teach psychological safety in the feedback meetings, because that's how you really get that conversation going. A leader can't change that environment by themselves. The team has to be collaborative in that effort as well for people to really be engaged.
That's such an important and powerful point that you're making there. It has to work on both sides. And so let's dive into the training that you're doing, because you've created a program called On Deck Management Training. And so I'd love for you to talk about, that, and what was the need that caused you to create that?
Yeah. Man, I love that program. It's a lot of fun. On Deck was one of those very intentional things that we're talking about with having that intention, because we had to solve what we called a speed problem here at FedEx. So let me tell you what I mean by that, Meredith. You remember that movie, Back to the Future? Mm-hmm. Michael J. Fox, and he jumps into that DeLorean and he goes back 30 years. So he goes from 1985 to 1955. And in that time, the clothes are a little bit different, but the biggest technological change you see in that movie is really the fact that he plays the guitar with a little more fervor than everybody else plays the guitar. He puts a little more rock in the rock and roll than they're used to doing in the 50s. But think for just a minute, had he jumped forward? So he goes from 1985 to 2015. By 2011, there was this little thing that all of us have, right, called the iPhone that had reached critical mass. So he would have seen people walking down the street with a handheld computer, checking directions or texting, doing anything but calling on a telephone, right? And that's kind of the acceleration that has happened. And I feel like COVID has accelerated that again. And that happened for our frontline leaders too. The technology changed, the speed of the business has changed, our customers' expectations were changed. It used to be enough for us to get something somewhere overnight. With vaccines, we had to get it overnight, really cold. And so the business keeps getting more and more complex. And we needed a way to get our managers proficient faster, because the best way to lose an employee's trust is to be unwilling or unable to solve problems for them or help them solve problems. We hire people that are willing, and we just needed to teach them the able part. And On Deck, that's the job of On Deck. So it's named after the next batter up, right, in baseball. And it's basically a proactive hiring where a manager goes through an internship program where we teach them how to be a leader before we give them their first work group to lead. So I think we're finally getting it in the right order.
Oh my gosh. One of the most common problems we hear about, and this is universal, is too many people get promoted from being a technical genius, let's say, in getting the work done, to a leader role with no preparation. So you're turning that old model on its head and really preparing people before they ever get into that role. I love that. So talk about, what are some of the things that you provide for them so that when they do step into that role, they feel confident and prepared?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the big things that we do is the crucial conversations piece. How do you have a conversation with an employee that maybe is a difficult conversation without losing the relationship with that employee? There's a way to be clear and guide and coach and all of those other pieces. We really help them with the ins and outs of the technology that they're going to be using, so that they're better at it. We help them with establishing and learning FedEx culture and how we take care of each other and what's important to us at FedEx, and really teach them how to handle those different situations and how to think about leading employees in all of those spaces and being a thought leader for their peers. I'll tell you this, the business, HR, I think, and learning and development sometimes have the problem that they feel like the business doesn't value what they do. But coming from the business, from being an operator, what I know is that the business will do anything you need them to do as long as it adds value for them. If it doesn't, they will fight you every single step of the way, and it is going to be a battle. And so when I took this role, I told my team, listen, here's the key. We need to be building demand. When I was in college and you wanted to get concert tickets, I'm probably dating myself here. Like, you camped out overnight to get the best seats, right? But if we can think about that from a learning development perspective, if people are coming to our programs like that, if they'll camp out overnight to get those seats in our programs, then we're probably giving them something that adds a whole lot of value. And that's what we see with this. So I think demand is one of the best metrics we can look at. In L&D, people really wonder, how do you measure learning and development? How do you measure its efficacy and those kind of things? We have great efficacy with this program. We measure senior managers who are the leaders who mentor, and we measure the learners themselves. But the uptake is outstanding. So we just posted 75 new positions. We had almost 800 people apply for those. And I think one of the coolest things about it is that we're seeing amazing retention with these guys, but also, the people who apply for the program, we're seeing an amazing amount of women. I mean, we're trucks and airplanes, so we're not always the most female business in transportation, right? We're seeing an amazing amount of women and an amazing amount of minorities apply for these programs and get selected for them. And Meredith, that's doing amazing things to our talent pipeline too. So when you look at this program from all of those different places, it's giving people the confidence to become leaders where they didn't have it before.
I just love that. I love everything you just said. And how long is this program? Is there a designated time period, or is there a curriculum and a structure to it?
Yeah, for sure. So they apply for the program. The whole thing takes about 9 months. They apply for the program. They go through the interview process. We have a program we call AIM, or Advance into Management, that people can do beforehand to kind of get ready for management and offset previous management experience. So we kind of give our folks a leg up. We really like to promote from within at FedEx for getting in and taking a leadership job. So once they've gone through those pieces, which happened prior, and they get into the on-deck program, they go through an intensive 3-month internship. We really teach them the network all up. We bring them here to the Memphis hub, and we let them meet their person who actually works on their freight. Then they have that relationship built. We take them to the National Civil Rights Museum, which is here in Memphis, and is an unbelievable experience. Do a lot of stuff like that. And the entire time that they're in that program, they're mentoring and being coached by an effective senior manager. And that manager's team as well. And then they have 3 months to be assigned their first management work group after that. So depending on their readiness, we have other training that we keep doing for them. If they're ready to jump in right away, then they jump in right away.
The practice is such a critical piece of really getting that experience. In other words, they're not going to learn it sitting in a classroom. So I love the way you've structured this, where they're in real situations, doing things real time, not just hypothetical, conceptual, instruction. It's very hands-on. And the fact that they're being mentored by someone is such a wonderful support system. I think that the pieces you put together are just so powerful for getting results, because my guess is once they move into that leadership role, the percentage of them that succeed is very high.
Well, yeah, and the percentage is very high, but one of the great things about it is they're proficient so much sooner. When we put them into the role and they've got a work group and people relying on them, and the level of busyness that all of us have as leaders, because now we're responsible for a group of people, those pieces of learning have to happen secondary. A lot of times we put ourselves last, as we probably should somewhat as leaders, right? So allowing them to have a full-time job of learning how to do the job, their speed to proficiency, Meredith, is so much faster.
I just, there's a common thread here in terms of productivity and effectiveness. I just love the fact that you're in charge of organizational effectiveness, because I can feel the way you have, kind of zoomed out to see the big picture and what would be required to really maximize the effectiveness of everyone. So I just think that's so great. One of the other things that you just beam about when you talk about it is the whole system of benefits that FedEx has put in place. It's a real differentiator for FedEx as a company, as an employer. To stimulate the thinking of my listeners about benefits they might want to consider, talk about some of the benefits that FedEx has put in place and how that has benefited the company as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's a two-way street. There's two programs that might be worth mentioning that are top of mind, I think, for people in the development space right now. And please forgive me for how much we love our acronyms at FedEx, but they're called Life and Lift, and I'll tell you just a little bit about them. Life is Learning Inspired by FedEx, and it's a partnership with the University of Memphis. Go Tigers Go. They're our hometown team, so we're proud to be working with them. And what it does is it takes people in our frontline positions that are sorting boxes. That's their gig. And it helps them either get a high school diploma, an associate's degree, or a bachelor's degree with the possibility of zero out of pocket. And that's really important. Remember when I was telling you my story that I got out with no debt? Well, student debt is the second highest debt most people carry next to their mortgage. And there's a lot of people that just have no idea how they're even going to get into a college. The great thing about this program is the university has been so nimble and innovative to work with. So they guarantee our team members admission into the university if they finish the prep academy without an ACT or an SAT or any entrance exam. And if you're new to academia, that's a huge hurdle that's removed that you don't have to worry about. Plus, the Prep Academy is a mastery program. So you learn how to do college level work, time management, those kind of things. And you carry 12 academic credit hours into your first university. So basically, you got credit for your first semester. The benefit starts on day one that you join FedEx, so you don't have to wait. And people can pursue any degree they want. Although, little Jedi mind trick that I told you could be almost anything at FedEx, and most of them are pertinent anyway. We have 55 people since we started who graduated with their bachelor's degree. And of those people, 82% of them are still at FedEx and are in a higher paying job now than when they started their college. Many of them in our leadership roles, and many of them have gone through our on-deck program. The diversity of this program is so robust, and it's nationwide because the University of Memphis Global Online is who does it, that it outpaces our employee population for women and men. In fact, it's more than 50% female. And the people in the program are 80% less likely to leave FedEx than those people that are not participating. So it solves that turnover problem that so many of us are dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Interesting with that. And I love your acronym, Learning Inspired by FedEx Life.
I'd love to take credit for that. The university came up with it.
Oh, well, either way, it's a cool acronym. And just thinking about the importance of what you've said in terms of the impact on turnover, because one might suspect without any data that, gosh, if we pay for people to further their education, then as soon as they get their degree, there's a good chance we're going to lose them. That's not what's happening.
No, and it's sometimes it's the handshake with the other programs we talked about that keeps people engaged. There's a next step for them, and there's an entire talent pipeline that they can move up, and that starts to connect the sinew of how do I build a career here. Mm-hmm. I think. If it's okay, there's a great story about our very first graduate because there are so many personal stories. We get lost in the statistics sometimes. And are you okay? Can I tell you?
Stories are the best, please. Yes.
So we go to the Memphis hub to kick this off, and it's 2018 when we kicked off, and it's pre-COVID. So we've got an auditorium full of, there is 12,000 team members that work at the Memphis hub alone. So it's a large organization. Tons of people have come to hear us talk about it. I'm a little nervous, right? We go in there, but we've got this full auditorium and we share all this information about the LIFE program. That's an easy thing to share. It's a good news story, right? And this operations manager who worked at the hub came up to us and he says, I can't believe I'm here talking to you about this, but I want to know, how do I enroll? And he tells us the story about how he promised his mom when she was dying that he would finish his degree. It sounds dramatic, but really she said, please, please, please finish your education. Anyway, so you know the story, like life gets in the way. He got on at FedEx and went full time, and then it was harder to go to school. And then he met this sweet girl and they got married, and then they had 2 daughters of their own. And then it's soccer practice instead of enrolling in classes. And then it's saving for their college instead of his college. Anyway, he decides he's going to fulfill this promise. Both of his daughters were enrolled at the University of Memphis at the time. But he had some past credits that the university was great about transferring. They also got some credit for FedEx learning that we had competency walked with the university, experiential learning credit that he was able to bring in. And Meredith, he beat both of his daughters across the stage when he joined the LIFE program. And he was our first graduate.
Oh, wow. That is such a great story. And just, I am imagining the impact on his family, on his coworkers, on himself, what that must have done for him to fulfill that promise to his mother. What a great, great story. And you were mentioning that other program that you
I'm sorry.
What was the second one? That was a great, great example there.
Well, LIFT, our Learning Innovation for Tomorrow, is how we're trying to crack that employee upskilling nut. And, we talked a little bit earlier about acceleration and how things are continuing to accelerate to the point that often people are having to reskill multiple times during their career, new technology, new programs, whatever. But that's hard because learning's expensive and learners are busy. And this is a place where I'm really proud that my team has used a lot of intentionality in solving. So we created a survey tool. We call it the Future of Work Survey. And basically what we're measuring in that is skills gaps between where we are today and the skills that we need in the next 5 years. And then we take our LIFT program and we build pathways directly into those skills, very intentional in those areas. And we're starting to write our job descriptions where entry-level positions are fulfilled by the learning in that pathway. So data literacy, coding, UX, UI, project management, business essentials, all of those kind of things. We've got 800 users right now just in our staff groups, and we're continuing to expand the program. And it's important because, I was telling you that at FedEx, we really try very hard to promote from within. We have a promote from within philosophy. And if we can grow our talent, then we've got really good talent to promote from within. And we also keep those people who are in entry-level jobs that are threatened by new technologies in an ability to upskill for free. So they're moving into new positions and just kind of moving up the value chain in what they're doing. So if they used to enter data, now they might be interpreting data. And so we're just kind of helping them scale up.
Mm-hmm. And are those like online courses, or what does the program itself look like? What are they?
Yeah, it's both. So it's online courses, it's boot camps, it's all of it can be taken online. Most of it can be rewatched. Again, with our great partners at the University of Memphis, we have them competency walking those programs so people can also apply for experiential learning credit with the university if they want to finish a degree. But I'm going to tell you, Meredith, a lot of the people who are enrolling in these programs are people who have a bachelor's or a master's or farther, but there's new skills around them that they just haven't learned yet and they need to pick up. And they don't want to go do an entire new college degree in order to do that. They want to take a few courses and learn it. I have a gentleman that works for me who learned Power BI. Power BI is just a visualization set in the Office 365 toolkit. And I tease all the time because the licenses we do for this program it charges $25 to my cost center. There's no cost for the employee. And I tease all the time that it's the best $25 we've ever spent because I have 4 new dashboards because he took those courses.
Oh,
yeah.
The combination of, programs and initiatives that you've put in place I can see why you have loved evolving over the years. You know, you're such a shining example of what FedEx to me stands for, based on what you've been sharing, looking for opportunities to help people grow, learn. That's so important. As you look back on everything, I'm just wondering if you could pinpoint one or two things that you're most proud of in terms of what you and your team have put together and accomplished.
It's those individual stories. We've had so many situations where with the On Deck program, with the Lift program, or with the Life program, just as the examples that we've talked about today, where we'll have a learner who says, this made such a difference in my life because it gave me the confidence to do this. I do think it's one of the reasons we see so much uptake from, and this makes me very proud, from our female employees, because I think sometimes we have a tendency as women to say, I don't fully check every box on that checklist. And so I'm not going to apply for that job, or I'm not going to try and move into that. And I think these kind of programs that help to catapult people up, give them the confidence to say, you know what, I do check enough boxes and there's something to help me get there until I do. And it really, really is changing the face of leadership at FedEx. And I'm really excited about that. There's a lot of women in transportation now.
That's great. Boy, that's so needed too. I want to just acknowledge you and affirm the great work you're doing and have done and all you've accomplished. It just touches me deeply when I talk to someone like you who is so committed to growing yourself and then having an impact like you're having throughout FedEx because of your commitment to listen as a leader to what people are saying they want and need, and then look for ways to put in place solutions that are going to address those. So thank you, Tamera, for who you are and what you're contributing.
Thanks, Meredith. Now I'm just embarrassed.
So tell people, I know after listening to you, you're going to have people who want to connect with you and be able to have conversations with you about this fabulous work you're doing. Please share that.
Yeah, so LinkedIn is probably the best place to find me. I often am connected in my inbox there, and those kind of things. And I know you're going to have that in the show notes, but LinkedIn is perfect. I also love to get inspired by the ideas that other people are doing. I say that good composers maybe borrow a little bit. Great composers completely steal and plagiarize, and I want to do that too. So my Twitter handle is @CarverMarsh, and I would love to follow and to be followed on Twitter so we can compare ideas and those kind of things. I love growing my network and meeting other people. So absolutely, please get in touch.
That's great. Yes, and I've had some other guests that you would be just having amazing conversations with them too. So I'll be making some connections as well. Thank you again, Tamera, for our conversation today. I just so appreciate you and what you're doing.
Thank you for having me, Meredith. I really enjoyed the time, and I've so enjoyed getting to meet you and get closer to your podcast.
Thanks for tuning into my podcast. Now head over to growstrongleaders.com and check out our 2 books, Connect with Your Team and Peer Coaching Made Simple. While you're there, download the free Facilitator Guide to find out how to implement our unique peer coaching system. Until next time, I'm Meredith Bell.